Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naran Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 6, Sankhya Yoga, verse 16. Na ati ashnataha tu yogaha asti nasti ashnatastu yogosti. Na cha ekantam anashnataha na cha ekantam anashnataha na cha ati swapnashilasya na chati swapnashilasya jagrataha na eva cha arjuna jagrato naiva cha arjuna nati ashnatastu yogosti na chaikantam anashnataha na chati swapna shilasya jagrato naiva charjuna nati ashnatastu yogosti na chaikantam anashnataha na chati swapna shilasya jagrato naiva charjuna nati ashnatastu yogosti na chaikantam anashnataha na chati swapna shilasya jagrato naiva charjuna nati ashnatastu yogosti na chaikantam anashnataha na chati swapna shilasya jagrato naiva charjuna nati ashnatastu yogosti na chaikantam anashnataha na chati swapna shilasya jagrato naiva charjuna. Online translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Translation. There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. Translation with repetition. There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Regulation of diet and sleep is recommended herein for the yogis. Too much eating means eating more than is required to keep the body and soul together. There is no need for men to eat animals because there is an ample supply of grains, vegetables, fruits, and milk. Such simple foodstuff is considered to be in the mode of goodness, according to the Bhagavad Gita. Animal food is for those in the mode of ignorance. Therefore, those who indulge in animal food, drinking, smoking, and eating food which is not first offered to Krishna will suffer sinful reactions because of eating only polluted things. Bhunjite te tva agham papa e pachanti atma karanat. Anyone who eats for sense pleasure or cooks for himself, not offering his food to Krishna, eats only sin. One who eats sin and eats more than is allotted to him cannot execute perfect yoga. It is best that one eat only the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna. A person in Krishna consciousness does not eat anything which is not first offered to Krishna. Therefore, only the Krishna conscious person can attain perfection in yoga practice. Nor can one who artificially abstains from eating, manufacturing his own personal process of fasting, practice yoga. The Krishna conscious person observes fasting as it is recommended in the scriptures. He does not fast or eat more than is required, and he is thus competent to perform yoga practice. One who eats more than required will dream very much while sleeping, and he must consequently sleep more than is required. One should not sleep more than 6 hours daily. One who sleeps more than 6 hours out of 24 is certainly influenced by the mode of ignorance. A person in the mode of ignorance is lazy and prone to sleep a great deal. Such a person cannot perform yoga. Thus, NC Transcendental Bhaktivedanta Purport. Om Ajnanatimmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are discussing chapter 6, Sankhya Yoga, and this is from the second section. In the first section that we saw from verses 1 to 10, the mind as enemy or friend, that is being discussed. And then in the second portion of this chapter, starting verses 11, we are discussing the Astanga Yoga process. And Lord Krishna is instructing Arjuna on the various steps that needs to be, various do's that needs to be followed in order to practice Astanga Yoga. So as we saw how a yogi must go to a secluded place, he must lay kusha grass and then cover it with deer skin and then a soft cloth. And then he should the seat should neither be too high nor too low, and various other aspects like how he should sit straight and how he should concentrate on the tip of the nose, and so on and so forth. So the various instructions about how to practice Astanga Yoga was mentioned. And then there was further description about what happens to one who is perfect yogi. What is his destination? So as we saw, that mat samsthanam adhikachati. So he attains to the kingdom of God. And then in the, so this is the last verse that we saw. What is the destination of a perfect yogi? Now, starting this verse and the next verse, Lord Krishna is telling some don'ts. As what can lead one not to attain that perfection, the destination of reaching the supreme abode of the Supreme Lord. What are the things that might hinder one reaching from the destination? So in this verse, na ati ashnatah tu yogah asti. So na ati, not too much. And what is that is not to be done too much? Ashnataha. So one who eats too much. So what he cannot become a yogi. Na cha then there is na cha ekantam. So even if one is eating too low, ekantam, anashnataha, abstaining from eating. So the extreme of eating too much and not eating at all. So there are two extremes. That is being said that anyone who is doing these two extremes, too much eating, not at all eating, abstaining completely from eating, both of them cannot attain, become a yogi. And similarly, in the next two lines, Lord is explaining that nacha ati swapnashilasya. So of one who sleeps too much, swapnashilasya, jagrataha, or one who is awake. And Prabhupada is saying one who keep night watch too much, or in other words, one who does not sleep enough. This is another extreme. So one side, one who is eating too much, and one who is not eating at all or abstaining from eating. On the other side, one who is sleeping too much, or one who is not at all sleeping, who is awake. In both the cases, Lord is saying that he cannot attain or he cannot become a yogi. Now, these are some very practical principles that Lord is enunciating here. And in fact, Prabhupada, when he is giving this lecture, when the devotees recite this verse, immediately Prabhupada says, this is very nice. So, and then Prabhupada goes on to explain why this is so nice. So maybe we'll just first look at what is a connection between eating, sleeping, and doing yoga, and why this transition is important from discussing the perfection of yogi to the condition of eating and sleeping. In the next verse, even further description will be given about how to moderate one's eating and sleeping, what is recommended. So here in this verse specifically, there are don'ts, what is not to be done, not too much eating, not too less eating. So Prabhupada says that the first point to note here is that there is no prohibition of eating or no prohibition of sleeping. So it is not that Lord is saying you don't eat at all or you don't sleep at all. No, that is not being said here. Here, one who eats too much or too little. So it is extremes that is being not recommended here. Similarly, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. So those extremes are not recommended. And Prabhupada says that why these two extremes are not recommended, because after all, we need to practice this yoga principles using this body. So if this body is not well equipped, is not maintained in a healthy state, then there is no question of practicing yoga. And when there is no question of practicing yoga, there is no question of attaining perfection. So it is very fundamental to maintain the body. And before Prabhupada says why it is important to body, Prabhupada says a little more about what is this deceased condition of life. It is important to note, Prabhupada says that the material body is source of all miseries. And Prabhupada goes on to say that the spirit soul has no misery. As soon as there is body, we have some sort of pain, some sort of miseries, either because of body, mind, or other living entities, or the natural environment. One or the other reason, there is some sort of misery. And Prabhupada is emphasizing that just like one is deceased, when one is deceased, one feels uncomfortness, one feels pain, or one finds some sort of unhealthy condition where he's not, he recognizes that this is not what I want. Similarly, Prabhupada says that one should recognize that we are also in a diseased state. And what is that diseased state? Prabhupada says having this material existence or being this material existence is a disease. And Prabhupada says that because of this wrong consciousness or not having proper consciousness, one is having different conceptions in this material existence. And because of having different conceptions in this material existence, like I'm Indian, I'm African, I'm Russian, or whatever, or I am his father, daughter, son, child, whatever it is, and carrying those conceptions of life in this body prolongs one's material existence. And Prabhupada says that one who is intelligent must try to get out of this disease. One should not continue this disease. And this is very important. And Prabhupada says, how can one come out of this material disease, the existence which is not one's true nature, where one is supposed to experience where the destination one is supposed to reach is the supreme eternal sky, the spiritual world. On the other hand, the living entity is struggling here, which is not his natural state. So Prabhupada says that the yoga system is the connect. Yoga system is the way by which one can overcome this diseased condition. And just like as we go to a doctor who recommends a certain disease, for a certain disease, he recommends certain do's, don'ts, and he also tells what happens when you're cured. Just like when I went to doctor recently, he said, take this medicine and so on and so forth. Then I asked him, how do I know if the disease is gone? Then he said, you will become healthy, strong, you will not feel weak, you will not feel tired. He told some symptoms. And so did he give some do's and don'ts. Similarly, here, in order to overcome the disease of material existence, Lord is giving us instructions on some do's and don'ts. So we saw some do's in the previous verses, and in this verse, some don'ts are being mentioned. And Prabhupada says further that this process of eating or sleeping needs to be regulated. So this word regulation is very interesting. If you look at the dictionary meaning of regulation, it has got two meanings. I think it's not here. So one of the meaning is that it's a rule or a directive given by an authority. So there is a certain rule or direction of how one should use something, or what is the process that one needs to follow in a given circumstance. The other one is the activity or the process that is meant to regulate something. So basically, it can be a rule, or it can be a process or an activity. So that's how it is defined. So here it is important to note that Lord, and as we will also see how Prabhupada, while training his disciples, has given various instructions on and different directives on how to eat and how to sleep, how much to sleep, and so on and so forth. And Prabhupada is also taking from various scriptures, and also sometimes Prabhupada recommends few things from Ayurveda as how one should regulate this process of eating and sleeping. So starting here, Lord is telling too much eating means eating more than is required to keep the body and soul together. So as we see here in this verse, that what is regulation and what is too much? How do we know? So we will see in future, in coming slides, Prabhupada is giving a few more directives on this principle. But the word atyahara is another synonym for this too much eating or collecting too much. So in the scriptures, there is a strict instruction in various places. For example, Srila Rupa Goswami, when he's describing the various principles which are detrimental to one's devotional life. The first principle that Rupa Goswami enunciates there is Atyahara. So Atyahara means to eat too much. And Prabhupada in another place gives an example of madhukari. So Prabhupada, especially when explaining about Sanatana Goswami and different kinds of sannyasis, Prabhupada explains this word further, saying that this word madhukari comes from the word madhukari. And Prabhupada says madhukari means just like a honeybee, which goes to different flowers and collects some amount of food. Similarly, an advanced devotee or a sannyasi must go and just collect so little from each place and collect only that much as he needs. Prabhupada says if he needs only one chapati, he should only collect one chapati, not more. And the process is to collect just little from every place. So Prabhupada is saying that the advanced devotees, they're naturally conscious. They naturally reduce this process of eating and sleeping. So in various contexts, there are various examples. We'll also see the example of Ragnar Das Goswami, which Prabhupada also explains in various contexts as how he minimized his eating. And Prabhupada also gives the example of Rupa Goswami and other Goswamis to state how one should eat and how much one should sleep. But at the same time, Prabhupada also gives few more directions on how do we follow them, but not imitate them. So we'll see that a little further. And then here Prabhupada goes on to say that there is no need for men to eat animals because there is an ample supply of grains, vegetables, fruits, and milk. Such simple foodstuff is considered to be the mode of goodness, according to the Bhagavad Gita. So as we see in the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, there are 3 kinds of foods that are being mentioned by the Lord. So it is said, Ayu Sattva Balarogya Sukha Preetir Vivardhanaha Rasyaha Snignaha Sthira Hridaya Ahara Satvika Priyaha. So the characteristics of the food which are in the mode of goodness. So the food which are in the mode of goodness, what do? They increase the duration of life, ayuhu. And they also purify one's existence. Ayuhu, sattva, balarogya. So, and they give strength. And further, it is said, they bring arogya, bala and arogya, they bring health, sukha, they bring happiness, priti, satisfaction, and vivardhanaha. So they bring all this in increasing. They all increase these things. What is that? They increase the duration, ayuhu. They increase or purify one's existence, sattva. They increase one's strength, bala. They increase one's health or arogya, and sukha or happiness. And further, they also provide satisfaction. So when one eats food in the mode of goodness, then one feels satisfied. So, and what is the nature of them? How do we know what is food in the sattvic nature? So further, Lord says, such food are sweet, juicy, fattening, and palatable. So, which are sweet, juicy, fattening, and palatable, they all come under the category of sattva guna, or the food in the mode of goodness. Then Lord also says, what are the characteristics of food in the mode of passion? Katva, amla, lavanati, ushna, tikshna, ruksha, vidahinaha, ahara rajasasyasta, dukkha shokamaya pradaha. So the food which are in the mode of passion, they are characterized by too bitter, too sour, salty, pungent, dry, and hot, and are liked by the people in the modes of passion. So whereas the food in the mode of goodness are juicy, sweet, fattening. On the other hand, the food in the mode of passion, they are too bitter, too sour, too salty, pungent, dry, and hot. And what happens to people who take this kind of food. Lord says that such foods cause pain, distress, and disease. So it is very important for us to recognize these characteristics so that when we are eating, we can know what kind of food are we taking. And further, the third kind of food that is being mentioned is that the food in the mode of ignorance, yata yamam gata rasam, puti paryushtam chayat, uchishtam api chamedhyam, bhojanam tamasa priyam. Food cooked more than 3 hours before being eaten, which is tasteless, stale, putrid, decomposed, and unclean, is food liked by the people in the mode of ignorance. So here Prabhupada is elaborating this by giving the example of people eating the food, people who are eating animals. So Prabhupada is saying animal food is for those in the mode of ignorance. Therefore, those who indulge in animal food, drinking and smoking and eating food which is not first offered to Krishna will suffer sinful reactions. So as we know, as we saw, that we want to get out of the diseased condition. So when we want to get out of the diseased condition, we need to take the right diet. If we do not take the right diet, then it may not support our process of overcoming the disease. So here it is important to note that the purpose of eating, there is a specific purpose. And that purpose, as we are seeing the mode of goodness, the food which is prepared and which is in the mode of goodness, they help increase one's strength, purify one's existence, increase one's duration of life. So if these qualities, if one is not doing this, then one is meant to undergo pain, like people who eat in the mode of passion, or one may have to undergo furthermore diseases for people who eat in the mode of ignorance. So Prabhupada says that sometimes people say that animal fat, when we eat animals, we get more protein, or we get more fat and things. Prabhupada negates that simply by eating dal, whole wheat, that whatever the protein that is needed can be supplied. And by taking milk products, one can be satisfied with the required fat. So this unnecessary propaganda that is created in the modern society, that you need to consume certain forms of non-vegetarian food in order to find protein and fat, is not true. And Prabhupada explains this further. And it is also important to note that for devotees, it's not just about the food in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance, but it has to be prasadam. And therefore, Prabhupada is explaining here further that which is food, eating food which is not first offered to Krishna will suffer sinful reactions because of eating only polluted things. So Prabhupada first is explaining the different categories of food, and then further Prabhupada is even going further to say that one who's not offering food to the Lord is also doing sinful, is also eating polluted things. So, and Prabhupada quotes this verse from 3rd chapter, 13th verse, Yagna Shistashina Santo Muchyante Sarvakil Bishai Bhunjate Te Tva Agam Papa Ye Pachanti Atma Karanat. So Prabhupada is saying Yagna Sishta, food taken after performance of Yagna. So what kind of food the devotees of the Lord take? Santaha. So here the word Santaha means the devotees. So devotees take only that kind of food which is first offered to the Lord. And why? Why do they so? Because that food is free from all kinds of sin. Otherwise, people who eat only for themselves, or who cook for themselves without offering to the Lord, they verily eat sin. And Prabhupada is explaining this here, that in all cases, as we see, the principle of sacrifice is such an important thing. Because in this material world, one of the biggest disease is aham mameti. One is too much attached or wants too many possessions. And one cannot give up the nature of having these possessions. So one is trying to accumulate different kinds of resources to keep in the house. One is trying to have more and more money. And in this way, one is trying to increase one's own material existence. But this principle of sacrifice is such a wonderful principle that by performing this sacrifice, this tendency of fruitive activity will vanquish. One of the biggest reasons why the living entity remains in this material world is because of this fruitive activity, which is binding one to this material existence again and again. But in order to overcome this tendency of fruitive mentality, if one develops that principle of doing sacrifice, and Prabhupada says that in the previous yugas, there are different kinds of sacrifices one has to perform, where one has to accumulate a lot of wealth, have many brahmanas, do different kinds of yajnas in order to satisfy the Lord. But Prabhupada says in this yajna, simply by doing shravanam, kirtanam, smaranam, one can satisfy the Supreme Lord. And Prabhupada says, in addition to performing these acts of shravanam and kirtanam, if one also does this process of offering food to the Lord, and not to take anything which is not offered to the Lord, simply by doing these two processes, Prabhupada says, by chanting and by taking Krishna Prasadam, one will be cured of all disease, Prabhupada says. So this is a very practical method that is being recommended by the acharyas, so that our tendencies to commit sinful acts of not offering to the Lord and just eating for our own sake can be easily overcome by offering. And the process is also very simple as how one should offer. So this is another important process, an important principle to note, that everything should be done as sacrifice. As we also see in the third chapter, that if we do not do it as sacrifice, it becomes bandhana, it binds one. And further, here Prabhupada says that one who eats sin and eats more than is allotted to him cannot execute perfect yoga. So in the modern day, there is a wrong conception. So one of the principles of Kali Yuga is hypocrisy. So people say it is yoga, but they do something else. People say this is religion, but in the name of religion, they do something else. People say this is government. In the name of government, they do so many things which are not supposed to be done by government. So there is hypocrisy everywhere. It is one thing, but what is done in the name of that thing is different. Similarly, the word yoga is also similarly misused by different people. People say yoga means you do whatever you like. You calm your mind, you breathe, you jump 360 degrees, or do different kinds of things. But that is not the perfect yoga, or neither that is a real yoga. As we also saw in the previous verse, Prabhupada was explaining that yoga is not to be performed for gymnastics, not for health reasons, not for other reasons, but to reach the supreme destination. And if that is the kind of yoga one is interested in, then one must be careful of not doing these things. What is that? To eat which is not offered to the Lord, and also to eat more than what is allotted. We will come to this point of overeating a little further. So it is important that as practitioners, we need to become conscious. And Prabhupada, as we see in his various places, is given different directives for devotees as how to follow. And this will be further even explained in the next verse, where there is even further description about what is moderation that needs to be followed. It is best that one eat only the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna. So the simplest way we can overcome this sin is and do a wonderful sacrifice by offering everything to the Lord, and the foodstuffs which are dear to the Lord, prepared in the mode of goodness. When it is offered, it provides us good health, and purifies us our existence from the sinful tendencies. Then Prabhupada goes on to say, a person in Krishna consciousness does not eat anything which is not first offered to Krishna. Therefore, only the Krishna conscious person can attain perfection in yoga practice. So this is another interesting point here, that people who are Krishna conscious, So once they become conscious of the Lord, they do not want to do anything which is independent of the Lord, not without acknowledging the mercy of the Lord, without losing out an opportunity to provide something to the Lord before they take anything, because they know that the Lord is the maintainer. Without Lord, there is nothing that they can have, because everything in this existence belongs to the Lord. And we, as part and parcel, the Lord, by his mercy, is providing us with all the necessities. And it is our duty to acknowledge that. And therefore, a person who is Krishna conscious, he can never eat anything without offering to the Lord, without remembering that it is mercy of the Lord. And devotees also recall as how Prabhupada used to eat or honor prasadam. Prabhupada was very focused. Prabhupada was honoring prasadam like a meditation, thinking about Krishna, meditating and glorifying Krishna, and not as something else. So this is another important sign of devotees who are in Krishna conscious, that they are very, very conscious not to do or eat anything which is not offered to Krishna. And Prabhupada is saying this is this principle of doing or eating which is only offered to Krishna. By doing this, one can attain perfection in yoga. Further, Prabhupada goes on to say what happens if the opposite happens. So, nor can one who artificially abstains from eating, manufacturing his own personal process of fasting, practice yoga. So, one side we are seeing overeating as how it can hinder one's progress in yoga. On the other hand, not at all eating, just fasting. And even this is not recommended. And especially here, Prabhupada is using the word manufacturing his own personal process of fasting. One of the important principles in spiritual life is not to manufacture one's own process, because this process is, as given by the acharyas and the Lord, is a foolproof system. Because as we see, tad viddhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. So when we are surrendering to a spiritual master, when we are approaching a spiritual master, we must recognize that the spiritual master, the bona fide spiritual master, is a tattva darshana. He has seen the truth, and therefore he knows the path by which one can see the truth. And therefore, simply by following that path, without artificially concocting. So especially when we do not have sufficient faith, then we think maybe we should need something else. Maybe we do not have all the required instructions here. So maybe I need to do something else. Maybe I need to go somewhere else. These kinds of thoughts may come, and therefore one starts manufacturing to add something or to remove something. And Prabhupada always told his disciples not to manufacture their own process. In all circumstances, Prabhupada was very careful in always telling his disciples, do not manufacture new ideas. Whatever is required is already given. It's just that we need to look for those instructions which are given and follow them. And Prabhupada is giving an example of process of fasting. So sometimes people have different conceptions of fasting. Sometimes people say Monday I will fast for this god, Tuesday for another god, or some other day for some other god. Or some people, in the name of fasting, they do it for some other reasons, like political reasons, or for maintaining weight balance, and so on and so forth. There may be different reasons why people may follow. But it is important that one try to understand the reasons for why one should fast and how one should fast. And Prabhupada explains the next line that Krishna conscious person observes fasting as it is recommended in the scriptures. So he doesn't try to follow some new varieties of fasting. Okay, now I'm advanced, so I will do something which is beyond scriptures or which is not present anywhere. It is not that kind of unwanted fasting, or he follows something which out of his own concocted mind. Prabhupada further says he does not fast or eat more than is required, and he is thus competent to perform yoga practice. So Prabhupada is explaining further that one who eats more than required will dream very much while sleeping, and he must consequently sleep more than is required. So This even in terms of Prabhupada has given very specific directives to devotees in terms of what should be the different meals and how it should be. Prabhupada also gave some specific instructions based upon place, circumstances for devotees who are having different issues and things like that. So if we carefully look and see the instructions of Srila Prabhupada, we can see there are so many details Prabhupada has given. We will look a couple of them in the next slides as how one must handle especially the principle of eating. And Prabhupada was also very conscious of devotees not wasting prasadam. In fact, once when devotees went to a house program, it seems that in Mumbai, that the host, they were so happy to see Prabhupada and his Western disciples that they made a huge feast. And some of the devotees were so happy to eat puri, halwa, and they went on taking as more than what they can eat. And Vishaka Mataji recalls this, that when she was sitting close to Prabhupada and she was moving around, Prabhupada saw there was an empty plate and Vishaka Mataji was sitting next to her, next to the plate. And immediately Prabhupada chastised her as why she was wasting. But Vishaka Mataji says that it was another devotee who left that, but Prabhupada was very conscious not to waste prasadam. So it is important to recognize some of these instructions that Srila Prabhupada is giving, which is very important for us so as to practice better yoga. And then Prabhupada is saying, if one eats more, then one is meant to sleep more because one is going to dream more. So if one dreams more, Prabhupada in other places says that everyone dreams. There is no question that no one dreams, but Prabhupada says one who eats more is going to dream more, and therefore he wants to sleep more. And Prabhupada says, is giving guidelines here as how much to sleep. One should not sleep more than 6 hours daily. One who sleeps more than 6 hours out of 24 hours is certainly influenced by the mode of ignorance. A person in the mode of ignorance is lazy and prone to sleep a great deal. Such a person cannot perform yoga. So this process, as we also see as given by Srila Rupa Goswami, that how that the tongue, belly, and genitals, they're all in the same line. And unless the first process of eating that is not regulated, then the other things will not be in that order. So similarly here, as if one's eating is not in the proper order, then the sleep will not be in the proper order. And when the sleep is not proper, one is again prone to go back to the disease condition, that is to be in the mode of ignorance. And therefore, one must pay attention to the regulation that is necessary so that one can advance in one's spiritual life. And in different circumstances, Prabhupada has given various instructions. I'll just take a couple of them. There are many of them. I think some of them will come in the next class. So Prabhupada, eating, sleeping, mating, all these are material demands. The more we minimize, then that is good, but not at all, not at the risk of health, because we have to work for Krishna. So we must maintain our health nicely, but we should not eat more than is required for maintaining body and soul together. That is the principle. It does not mean, however, that if one's body requires more food for maintaining it, that he should imitate someone who requires less food. The real point is that eating is for maintaining the body, not for luxury or for satisfying the demands of the tongue. So recently, as I was looking at I have to write some paper, and then I was looking at some work, and there is a book which was written by a Finnish scholar. So he talks about the cognitive science of Prabhupada's charisma. So he's seeing it from a scientific perspective and analyzing the characteristics of Prabhupada and trying to say what is that is so unique about Prabhupada and why Prabhupada is so much revered, why is he so much respected, why he is given a certain position or a certain respect, and why he is treated by his devotees in a very specific way, which is not done to anyone else. Why is that so? So he does a certain research as his part of PhD, and he writes a book. And one of the aspects that he mentions about the adaptability and practicality of Prabhupada. Prabhupada is very, very practical. Based upon time, place, circumstance, and the situation, Prabhupada was very, very adaptive. Prabhupada was able to make the right choices and the right instructions Prabhupada was able to give. And here, Prabhupada is again giving this example that because each living entity is very different, someone may want to eat more and someone may want to eat less. Prabhupada says if elephant needs 100 pounds, it should eat 100 pounds. If an ant needs 1 grain, the ant must eat 1 grain. So based upon one's necessity, one should take the food. But at the same time, the underlying principle behind this is that one should take the food for maintaining one's body and soul together, and not for luxury or satisfying the demands. While the quantity may vary based upon the individual, the underlying principle behind this is that it is meant only to maintain the body and soul. It's neither for filling one's belly too much, neither for gratifying one's tongue only. So like this, Prabhupada has given a principle so that devotees do not go to the extremes. And as we also know that another pastime of Prabhupada where some devotees started to fast and only take Ekadashi prasadam, thinking that the grain prasadam is not good. It makes one like an animal.
So they started fasting and they stopped doing service.
Oh.
And so why they are not doing service? We appreciated when we were fasting, so they were following. And you were told that only animals eat grains.
So this another place where Prabhupada appreciated a devotee who was fasting, and other devotees also started to fast and not do their services. And Prabhupada chastised them for why are they doing that way. And then Prabhupada said that one who is eating grains is an animal. And then Prabhupada says, does that mean that I'm also animal? So basically the point here is that one should not blindly imitate or follow rules which are, so there are general rules and there are specific rules. So every time we should also, when we are following specific rules, they should also match the general rules. So general rule is not to keep at the risk of health, and Prabhupada is mentioning here. More we minimize, then in the sense, the bottom line is that the service and health should not be deteriorated. Even Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj was very against those disciples who would fast and just sleep. Rather, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj would want them, you give them whatever is required, but should not give up the service of the Lord. So that is another important principle. And then Prabhupada also says, so far as eating only 2 chapatis and little vegetables daily, I never said that. So this is a letter by Prabhupada to Kirtanananda Swami, because I think they were following a certain system of what they should eat. So I think they created a new system saying that only 2 chapatis and little vegetables should be served every day. And then Prabhupada comes to know about this, and Prabhupada is replying back, I do not know why such news has spread without my written authority. One should eat as much as he requires. He should not overeat. That is the point. Without eating properly, how can we work? If one can digest them, then he can eat 20 chapatis. But if he cannot digest, then he should not eat. He should not even take 2 chapatis. The Ayurvedic system is to take half of what you can eat only, to fill 1/4 with water and leave 1/4 for air. That will make for proper digestion. Little rice, dal, some vegetables, some chapatis, like that. But eat right to the point to keep health steady. So this is another important point that we should keep in mind, that unlike various other yoga systems which may prescribe eat only vegetables or maybe not eat anything kind of stuff, Prabhupada is very practical, giving a healthy diet, and at the same time giving guidelines as to be moderate and take sufficiently so that one can keep the health steady and perform one's service. Moving on, we saw the sins kind of that. So I'll end with this pastime. So Prabhupada gives this example of those devotees who are advanced. And Prabhupada says one who is advanced in Krishna consciousness, naturally he will try to give up the excessive eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And in this regard, Prabhupada quotes the example of Ragnar Das Goswami. And then Prabhupada also gives certain very specific instructions as what we should learn from this and what we should not imitate. So Prabhupada says that because in the beginning we are accustomed to eat voraciously, don't try to eat less artificially. You eat, but try to minimize. So this is another very practical instruction. So Prabhupada is saying naturally one is habituated to eat in a certain way. You do not at once negate everything, but rather minimize it. Therefore, there are prescription of fasting. So Prabhupada is saying the fasting, if one follows, it would help naturally one balance one's eating habits. At least 2 compulsory fastings in a month. And there are other fasting days. The more you can reduce your sleep and eating, you keep good health, especially for spiritual purposes, but not artificially, not artificially. But when you advance, naturally, you will not feel. So Prabhupada again is making sure that one should not artificially do anything. One should minimize in a systematic way and follow the principles of fasting and thereby reduce naturally and not artificially. And Prabhupada is giving an example, but however, if one is very advanced, then one can naturally reduce. And the example is that of Ragnar Das Goswami. So as we know, Ragnar Das Goswami was son of a rich Majumdar, and he joined Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, and he left his home. And when he left his home, the father could understand that he has gone to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Puri. So he sent 4 servants because he was so rich, Majumdar, he could send 4 servants, and he sent a lot of money with them. And he sent 400 rupees. And Prabhupada says that means how much it must be today. So in the beginning, Ragnar Das Goswami was thinking, all right, this money was sent by my father, so let me spend this money in a way so that I can please the Vaishnavas. So he was inviting all the sannyasis and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and other devotees, and he was organizing a feast regularly. And then one day Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that, why am I not receiving invitation from Ragnar Das Goswami these days? Earlier he used to organize a huge feast. What happened to this? Then Swarup Damodar says, oh sir, he has stopped accepting his father's money. So he, as soon as he stops accepting money from his father, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he hears this, he says, oh, that's very nice. Then he says that Ragnar Das Goswami, so Damodar says that Ragnar Das Goswami was saying that I have renounced, and now what kind of a person I am that I'm taking my father's money? That is not right thing to do. A renounced person should not take money from his father. And therefore he refused. And then when the people came with money, he sent back them saying that I do not want this money. Then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu inquires, how is he surviving? What is he eating? Then Swarup Damodar says that when the priest in Jagannath temple, they go home, they offer something and he's satisfied. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, all right, oh, this is all right, very nice. Then, then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was inquiring, how is he standing there? What is he doing and things like that. And then after a few days, Swarup Damodar says that he has stopped that standing also. Then, in fact, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that I am not able to see him there. What has happened to him these days? Then Swarup Damodar says that he has thought that, oh, I'm standing like a prostitute and somebody will come and give me something. That is not nice, and therefore he even stops doing that. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asks, how is he eating then? Then he says that he's collecting some rejected rice in the kitchen, and which is there in the washing area, and he's eating that. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu one day goes next to Ragnar Das Goswami, and he says, "I've heard that you're eating very nice food stuff, and you're not inviting me." And he was trying to find out where that rice that is collected by Ragnar Das Goswami that he is taking. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was trying to find that, and Ragnar Das Goswami says, "Sir, you do not eat this. This is not for you." Then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, "It is Jagannath's prasad. How can you say it is not fit?" And just to encourage him, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu takes that food stuff, and he also takes the morsel of that. So, as we see in the life of Goswamis, they were minimizing all their bodily necessity, material necessities to the point of nil. And then Prabhupada says, don't try to imitate Ragnar Das Goswami, but because they are associates of Lord Chaitanya, each one of them showed some example, unique example of how Krishna consciousness can be advanced. But our business is not to imitate them, but try to follow them. Try to follow as far as possible, not artificially. And then Prabhupada goes on to explain further that we must take lessons from the Goswamis and set up those as an ideals, and how we can move towards that without artificially imitating them. And Prabhupada says if one artificially imitates them, then one will actually fall down from one's spiritual practice and will struggle. So in short, this verse is talking about how we don't do some things, that is extreme eating or not eating, or extreme sleeping and not sleeping. At the same time, follow the directives as given by Srila Prabhupada as what needs to be eaten, what kind of food needs to be eaten, and the importance of offering. And in this way, we can progress further in our spiritual life. We'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments.